What's one thing about the podcast that you thought would be easy, but actually wasn't?
I think the hardest thing has been like growing the audience and actually trying to get people to get it in front of people to get them to listen to it. I think I knew that bit wouldn't be easy, but I don't think I thought it would be quite as hard as it seems to have been, because I feel like you have to just be posting it on social media and telling people about it all the time for it to just be in front of them, which perhaps isn't something I'm always great at doing. What about you?
For me, it's got to be the editing, the creating captions, the snipping, the admin overhead of once you create a podcast. I very naively thought that we would just be a one and done take. And I think as the podcast matures, there's going to be more editing. Our podcast is very compact in that we do a 25-minute pod and we maybe cut that down to 22 minutes. I know that the more experienced podcasts are doing 2 hours of talk and then chopping that down into a 30-minute segment. So I think the amount of editing that a podcast does, that is mainly done by yourself, Hayley, I'm not going to lie, but the amount of editing to get it to the place where it is a huge time constraint, probably 1 to 2 hours a week to get that weekly pod updated and ready to go.
Yeah, that has taken a surprisingly long time. And interestingly, because we use AI for it, imagine what it was like before those tools came into the world. So what's the one thing that surprised you about doing the podcast?
I'm naturally a good speaker, and I've done some speaker training to try and improve on that. When I first started the podcast, I completely forgot how important structure was. And so when we first started the podcast, we just had conversations and we weren't looking to really be hit to a point. And I think it took me a few weeks to realize, actually, we need to make this more compact and we need to get us up to speed. And it was only when I was listening back to the pods, I thought, okay. And also, it always feels like I talk for too long. And on that note, what surprised you, Hayley?
Thing that surprised me most is probably how much I've enjoyed doing it and speaking with all the different guests and meeting all the different people. Because when we talked about starting it, or we started to go down this road of doing it, there was all sorts of good things that could potentially come out of it that you think about, but actually that side of it I hadn't really considered. So I think that's probably the most surprising thing for me, given I'm such an introvert, don't really like talking to people. There you go.
What's a lesson you heard from a guest that made you quietly rethink how you run your business?
Now I'm being put on the spot to remember all of the different episodes. I don't know whether it's the one that's made me do things differently, but the one that initially came to mind when you said that was the lady, and I feel like we had two ladies that we interviewed that said similar things, but the one that stands out for me is the bit about knowing yourself. And I always think about that. It comes to me quite often in my head, that conversation that we had and why that's such a difficult thing to do. I don't necessarily think I've 100% acted upon on it yet, but I think that's the one that most stays with me. But we've had loads of really good takeaways when you actually, if you actually like condense it down and just think about the takeaways from each of them. We've had quite a lot of good things, I think. And the last one, the chap that said about just being nice, that's a really good thing as well, I think. What about you?
For me, I think it's very similar. I think when Alistair came on and talked about not necessarily hitting targets, but looking at making slight improvements so you're heading towards a target, I think that was instrumental for me to say, okay, instead of closing 10 tickets a day or whatever it's going to be, how many tickets do we close? How can we get that closer to the target? What incremental changes can we make? And I think the other thing has been the humbleness, the kindness, and the positivity of the business owners that have been on has certainly driven me to think, okay, right, I need to up my game in just being polite, being friendly, being positive, and being proactive. And I think they're more generic mindset than they are individual points. But I think every time we interview somebody, I always come away energized and thinking, wow, okay, How can I move closer to that point?
What has the podcast done that isn't obvious?
What has the podcast done that isn't obvious? It's definitely brought ourselves together as an absolute collaboration partnership to the point where we are attending business expos together and having conversations with people together, because I think you're more of an introverted introvert and I'm an introverted extrovert, which means that I will not attend anything. But once I'm there, everybody will think that I'm having the time of my life. The other thing that the podcast has done is it's given me an opportunity to be humbled and to speak to really amazing people that have taught me lessons and have opened up pieces of my mind that I didn't think would be opened up. What about you, Hayley?
For me, I'd agree with both of what you've said. I think they're both things that have happened that weren't necessarily obvious at the start. I think also for me, it's been, I don't want to use the word confidence because that's not the right word, I don't think, but it's the being able to be, to do this, to sit on a call and have a conversation and be able to hold it and construct it and make it actually useful to somebody listening and it not just being waffle. I think that's something that a skill that I've developed that I don't think I thought that I would at the beginning. So I'd say that for me, that's probably my thing that isn't obvious.
What's one thing hosting this podcast has changed about how you show up in your own business?
I think it's that feeling that you're making a difference to people even more. Like, I think that's a big thing for me in my business and my life. I like helping people and I like feeling like I am making a difference to them. And through the people that we've spoken to, I think that's a common theme through all of them. That's where they come from. That's the place that they see, most of them anyway, seem to come from that same place. And I think that kind of reinforces it within me that I'm doing a good thing and the right thing and that actually you can make a difference, if that makes sense. I feel like it makes sense.
Definitely. For me, it's not just, and I completely agree with you, that every day we should be driven by value, not just value to customers, but value to staff, value to the business, value to other people's businesses. I think a lot of the time it removes some of the head junk. When you speak to somebody who's been really successful and often they're talking about numbers, whether it's number of customers, level of growth, whatever it is. And you think, okay, actually, these things are achievable. I now need to spend more time working on my business and working out how do I get to that point and how do I get to the point where I can come on the podcast as the success story, as somebody who can give a business lesson and can back it up as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good one. Let's talk about results, because I think that's something that so when we first started talking about this, I was very much like, Phil, this is a long game. It's not like we can't just do it for 3 months and that be it, because it won't, that's not how it seems to work. And I still think that now. So I think we're about 6 months in, maybe. I feel like we are gathering pace. I feel like we are slowly, more and more people are listening to it and, it's getting out there. And we've like gone back and done like different plan. How can we tweak it? How can we do it differently? And I feel like now the big thing going into next year for us is being consistent with that, which is something we haven't been great at. But how do you, what have you got any thoughts on that kind of instant results and getting the return on investment and all of that?
I think as a business owner, starting a podcast, you question what the return on investment will be. And I think it's something that we had quite a few conversations about, and that there wasn't going to be an immediate return on investment. What is the tangible return on investment? And my thoughts in truth were there isn't really going to be a tangible return on investment. However, the fact that it allows people to get to know us without speaking to us, I really hope that people have found value. The fact that it's allowed me to speak to some really great business owners and understand the vibe and understand the personality and understand the drive has been an unseen or an intangible return. I think the two other things where it's really been beneficial, as I say, one, the collaboration that's allowed between ourselves, And that's certainly allowed me to get out there physically in person to more events. Secondly, it's such a nice, soft introduction to people to say, rather than buy my stuff or let me haunt you with a meeting or this or that, to say, your business story sounds really interesting. Would you like to come on the podcast? Or to say to somebody, by the way, we've got a podcast. If you'd like to have a listen, can I send you a link across? I think that's a real nice, soft way to get to know somebody. And if they enjoy the podcast, often we'll meet up for a coffee and then I can get to know them and understand their business.
Yeah, I think that's been a great thing. You know what? I don't know why it surprised me, but some of the business owners that we have had on it are like, they're really successful businesses, really successful business owners with, they've made a lot of money. Some of them have sold businesses. Some of them are, whatever. That actually they were willing to come on and spend that time with us and share, because we're a new podcast. We don't have like a huge audience or whatever. And I think that that's a really nice thing that people did that or have done that, and hopefully will continue to do that. Yeah, we wouldn't have, we probably wouldn't have had that connection with those people, or, whereas now I feel like we very well could go back to anybody that's been on it and be like, oh, how are you? How's things going? You could start that conversation. It's there. Whereas before we would have just been like a cold message to somebody that wouldn't have had a clue who we were. So I think that's been a really good thing. If we started again,
I think it's allowed us the opportunity to collaborate with those people. So it's given us, and I hope our listeners, almost an unstoppable flow of mentors and people that are really nice and sound really nice that they can reach out to. And I think in the same way that those people are happy to come on the podcast, I think if any of our listeners wanted some advice or thought, I really enjoyed listening to that, I'm just going to ask them a question that's really burning for me that I'm struggling with in my business. I think everyone that we spoke to would be more than happy, unless we get to a Joe Rogan status where we're getting millions of requests. But I think they'd be more than happy to answer those questions. And the same for us, it's given me a team of almost mentors that I feel I can reach out to and say, could I ask you a quick question?
Yeah, it's very true. If we started again, what would you do differently? Please don't say not start.
Format of the podcast.
Okay.
I would have started recording the intro after the podcast. I would have got it to a tighter point that we're at now. And I think that's about it. I think all of our guests have been really, really good. I've been impressed with every single person. So I wouldn't have changed my guests. I wouldn't have changed our topic. I think, and I'm more guilty of this certainly than yourself, I think I'd have got much tighter on the timings when we were going to release the podcasts and the timings when we were going to put posts out and get the shorts to guests much more quickly. When I say shorts, I mean the short clips that we have from podcasts. How about yourself, Hayley?
Yeah, I think for me, it's that whole marketing strategy that I'm so crap at. It's that whole piece. And it's not just a strategy, it's the actual delivery of it as well. Yeah, I think having that nailed from the beginning and probably, getting someone else to help with that, probably with hindsight, probably would have been a good thing. But there you go. That's life, isn't it?
Looking back on it, I think both with the podcast and with my business generally, getting a virtual assistant involved to take some of that weight away. And again, it's very much an ego-based journey where you think, I can handle all of this. I'll get all of this done. It's not going to be an issue. And because we're business owners, because we're torn for, let's be honest, we're always seeking revenue, aren't we? So if you've got a 1 hour slot to do the podcast and you've got an opportunity for a, X £1,000 a month customer, you're going to turn over the podcast. And so then it becomes, okay, what if I can get a virtual assistant to do this for X amount per week? That would actually, my time would be well worthwhile. And I think that reluctance to invest in the pod and at the same time investing so much time in the pod is a balance. And I think that's absolutely universal for almost every single task that we do as a business owner. We want to do it ourselves because we can save money. We want to do that, but how much time does that take us? And then, what's the trade-off?
Yeah, and I think just to share, the way that we've done it is we blocked out 2 hours a week once a week to record the podcast. And that's when we did the recordings with guests. And we did that for probably about 14 weeks, I'd say, something like that. It's pretty good going, actually, isn't it? And I'd say it was probably another hour to 2 hours of editing per episode a week as a minimum. So that's probably about 4 hours a week, isn't it? We did, it's a bit of a royal we, but between us, we did that at the beginning.
I'll add on to that. One of the things that we did was we embraced AI. Riverside's a great piece of software because it allows you to get that transcript downloaded really quickly. And we've then got a GPT that we're able to upload that to and say, give me an idea of what you think our takeaway should be. Give us an idea of some introductions that we could do. And we can then use that to create blog posts, to write marketing about it. And yes, we edit that. But I think the transcript allows AI to feel our vibe, although for some reason it always says that Hayley's more professional, which is very debatable. No laughter from Hayley there. Very concerning.
I am very professional. There's very few people that get to see the non-professional side.
I think AI and the fact that Hayley edits the podcast also allow her to maybe put a little bit more of a shine on when we upload those transcripts. So I think the embracing of AI to help out with the format and to give us some feedback, because I don't think there are many podcast gurus that I'm aware of that we could message and say, do you mind listening to our podcast and giving us some feedback without paying them a huge amount of money?
Yeah.
And when I say a huge amount of money, I'm probably talking, £500 to £1,000. But for a podcast that's not got a set return on investment lift for us.
Yeah, and we were quite clear on that. So I think the other thing that is good for people to take away if they're considering doing it is that we set that out from the beginning, that we wanted it to be, in a way, minimal time, minimal effort, and we weren't ready to invest money into it at that point. We wanted to kind of, do it and see where it got to. So I think it's good to have that in mind. The thing that, the other side of all that we've talked about when we talked about surprising things, it has been quite easy to do it. When you think about undertaking other things like doing YouTube videos or, putting, even just doing like your normal social media posts for your own business, like that to me anyway, feels like a huge amount of effort and undertaking. And, I don't really know how to do it. But, really with this, we bought the software and through the time we've upgraded microphones and things, but really it was relatively easy to just get it up and running and do it. So that's a good thing. Any last thoughts before we wrap up?
To add to what you're saying there, I think the beauty of doing it as a partnership and also interviewing a guest has probably made the format easier for us because we can bounce off each other. We can look to have each other's thoughts. And I think we're a good vibe because we have very similar opinions, but we also have very different ways of approaching things. And so often I'll be thinking, I can see an obvious question here, and you'll ask a question that's to me completely left field. And I'd assume my questions are left field, but then we'll go along with that and we'll both look to really get maximum value. And I think it's that we both love to create value and we both look to get value from the pod that makes it much easier. And so far, all of our guests have been of exactly that kind of vibe as well. And they've all come to the pod to provide value, not to sell their stuff, not to try and get a load more clients, but to try and provide value and give something back to us and to the world, I suppose.
Yeah.
Have you got any wrap-up thoughts, Hayley? Other than I assume you want to maybe thank me or congratulate me.
Yes, well, thank you.
I want that edited out as well.
Thank you for showing up every week.
Edit that, please. Edit that.
Not that I had any doubts.
Thank you for all of the occasions you've managed to be on time, Phil.
The story there about the very first episode we recorded, isn't there? No, I think so. I think final thoughts is, I feel really good that we've done it. I am looking forward to 2026 and seeing what it brings. Who knows? There might be some changes. I don't know. I suppose. I think the thing is, the two things that I would say are you've got to be in it for the long game because you're not going to get quick returns on it unless you're like celebrity status, I don't think you're not going to get quick returns on it. So you've got to be in it for the long game. And therefore you have to make it enjoyable. You have to enjoy doing it. Otherwise you're not going to stick with it, is the truth of it. Let's be honest. Those are my two final thoughts.
I think that last thought is really important. Yeah, I've got to completely agree with that. I think you've got to enjoy doing this unless you want to pump a shed load of money into it.
Yeah, that's true.